Hey, this is Clint from CT Mad Mods, and this week we're going to switch it up a little bit. We got a Mazda CX7. The turbo just went out in it. This belongs to one of my buddies at work, and he bought this from one of those little shady fly-by-night car lots, and the guy totally took him to the ringers. Deleted all the codes, didn't tell him about what was going on, and he didn't test drive it. Found out the turbo is smoked. You ought to see this thing smoke. This is from my buddy Roy, and I'm gonna do Roy a favor, and I'm gonna pull this turbo out of this thing. What I noticed online on YouTube is that there aren't very good videos on doing this install, so I'm gonna help y'all out. I'm gonna do a little turbo install on the CX7. Let's get that cover off so we can see what we're working with. All right, there it is back there underneath all of that. So I've seen 2 or 3 videos on YouTube, and it looks like you can access that from the backside, from the top, instead of dropping the whole engine. If you got a blown turbo in your CX7, then I'm gonna try and do a how-to video on how to do it. All right, step 1, we're gonna pull this intercooler off. That cover is a couple of 10 millimeters that come off. You got a couple of 12s right here. Make sure you drop them down in there somewhere. Okay, you want to disconnect this hose down here and pull this hose off right here. And then this intercooler pops off, and then you got a hose back over here. Pop that off, and then you got a hose back over here. Intercooler's out of the way. Now we're gonna start kind of moving some of this exhaust stuff. I'm gonna take that shield off right there. Well, the hood made it about a minute and a half in. So go ahead and throw the hood off. Start taking this bracket off next. Look at this thing. All right, I'm taking this cover off right here, and it's some 8 millimeters. You got 1, 2, 3, and it looks like some on the back. 1, 2 at least. Get all those off and bring you back. She fit. All right, I had to take this intercooler hose off. That one right there. It was the one that was right over here. And to get this off. And right below all that is the turbo. I'm gonna remove this bracket next. To take this bracket off, you need a 13 millimeter socket. It's 2 13 millimeter bolts. This one's easy to get to. This one is kind of down in a hole. Let me see if I can get you on it. There's a 13 millimeter right there. So you're gonna need a little ratchet. I'm using a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 13 millimeter on it, and I'm able to reach it. But barely. Got them 2 bolts out, got that bracket out. Now we have a lot more access right here. So from what I understand, we can get that turbo out of this hole right here once we get it done bolted. Looks like Megatron's leaving. Just sprayed a little bit of rust penetrant on them 4 bolts on that exhaust pipe. And she's still a little warm. All right, I'm underneath. I dropped an 8 millimeter ratcheting wrench, because there's like a cover on the bottom side of that turbo. I was trying to get it off, but while I'm down here, I went ahead and started pulling the bolts on this exhaust pipe, and they are 14 millimeter, and they are hard to get off. So I just got those off. I'm gonna take that O2 sensor off, and I might even disconnect this front drive line and get it out of the way. Okay, you got 3 bolts on this downpipe right here, and I went ahead and pulled that O2 sensor. So this should slide right off at some point. Just kind of disconnect this muffler that's going all the way back here and pull that pipe out. Okay, I pulled this pipe out of the way. Throw that in the pile. Now we got a lot more room up in there to work. So throw it back down on the floor. Now I'm working on these top bolts on this manifold, and I had to get an opening wrench in there and crack it loose, and then I had this Mac offset wrench to get it out a little bit further, get that nut further out. It's a 14 millimeter, and once I got it to the point where I can get it off pretty easily, after I got it to a point where I could reach it a little easier, then I'm using a ratcheting wrench to get in there and just ratchet it out. So it takes a little bit of finesse, but you can do it. All right, these bolts on this downpipe are 14 millimeter. There's 4 of them. Be careful, break them loose. And don't forget all these little 8 millimeters that holds this guard on there. There's one on there and there's one on the back. Pull those off as you're taking these bolts off. Just figured out that there's 2 more bolts. One is way down here on the end, and there's another one down there. You can see it below down there. So I'm gonna try and get those 2 off. I'm working on the last bolt in this manifold, and it's right below this Y pipe right here. It's right in the center between them, and it is a mother to get to. You got to take off, there's like a shield, and I got a ratcheting wrench on it, and I broke it loose by putting the ratcheting wrench down there. Whew, I put that ratcheting wrench down there, and then I sent a zip tie down and put it around the wrench and was able to break it loose because nothing else fits. So I'm gonna zip this last one off, and I'll bring you back here in a second. Just got the exhaust to pop off, and it should come right out of this hole right here. Pull that sucker out. This is the exhaust, and the hardest bolt to get to was that one and that one right there. But if you got yourself a 14 millimeter ratcheting wrench and one of these little adjustable 1/4 inch drive ratchets with a 14 millimeter on it, you should be able to get those off. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do is take that O2 sensor out because it holds that little piece that holds that shield. I've got all the bolts out of that shield. Gotta pull the shield off. And then you got some bolts to this manifold that hook to the turbo. All right, I'm pretty far along. I think I'm gonna call it a night. This is Friday night after work. I'm gonna come back Saturday morning. Next time you see me, it'll be, and just like that, I'm back. Happy Saturday morning. And of course, you know I got some help today. All right, air compressor is gonna be working today because their entire season. I'm gonna remove this battery and box and all this because I have to get this out of the way, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I need to reach on this side. Oh, there goes the air compressor. But anyways, I need to get down in there and start removing stuff to get that turbo out. I'm under the impression that the cat's gonna be clogged because there's oil coming out of the tailpipe, and this thing has got a lot of power loss. I've never taken one of these apart. I'm just kind of getting in there and removing things. So if you've removed one of these and I'm doing it wrong, please let me know in the comments. Got the battery box out of the way, and that really opened up a lot. I should be able to reach some of these hoses and lines and stuff that go to the turbo from over here. Okay, I'm taking off the oil lines. There's one that's really far down there that you have to get underneath, and it's 2 8 millimeters. And these little bolts right here, you get one from the top and one from the bottom. You just have to get a open end wrench and get after that bottom one. But if you have the all-wheel drive model, you have to go between the transfer case and the engine. And then I used a pair of pliers to kind of long needle nose pliers to get the bolt out after I got it unbolted. Take these two oil lines off. You have this piece of the air box, this little guy right here, and it goes around, and there's a hose clamp that kind of holds it together. We get these two oil lines out, and then I think I have a coolant line to unhook. Okay, I'm trying to remove this little doodad out of the way. It's part of the air breather for the turbo, and you have to remove the bolt for the oil dipstick, and it's right down there. It's a 10 millimeter. Get that kind of pulled out of the way, and then there's a bunch of little wire connections that you got to pull off of these little tabs, and that wiring harness kind of gets out of the way, and then this thing starts to move out of the way. Just kind of wiggle her out of there. On the front of the turbo, you have a 17 millimeter, and it's a coolant line. On the back side, you have a 17 millimeter, that's a coolant line, and you have an oil line, and it seems like this is all bolted somewhere, and I'll find that bolt and disconnect all these tubes, so that comes off there. But this turbo is about to fall out of here. There's an 8 millimeter bolt holding that bracket with all these hoses on it. So that needs to be transferred over. And what else? There's something else in here holding all this together. I'll figure it out here and I'll let you know. All right, the last thing I had to get off is there's a nut that's holding that turbo in place on a bracket. It's 12 millimeter. We got the turbo out. I'm gonna start transferring over these little brackets and lines and all of that. They look the same, so I'm just gonna start putting it back together. One of the videos that I watched, they talked about pre-filling the turbo with oil before you put that oil line on, so right before we will do that. The hardest part about doing this is getting to that oil line that is right there. And so what I did was I got a pair of these long needle nose, and I reached up in there and I started that bottom bolt with these needle nose, and I just sat there and got it going. I think the top one's a little cross threaded, so I'm gonna pull that back out and send her home after I get this one tightened up. Well guys, you ain't gonna believe this, but I screwed up big time. I'm gonna call this one a total failure, and I'll show you why. This little guy right here, that's a broken bolt. I'll show you where I broke it. All right, this is underneath the engine. That is your oil return line for the turbo, and it is between this axle and the engine. And I broke that top bolt out. I broke it off in there in the engine. As you can see, you can come in from the top. I've never had to do this before, but I went and sat on a chair, and I sat there and looked at it for 45 minutes and thought about how in the world can I get that bolt and drill and tap it and fix it correctly. And without pulling the engine, I couldn't come up with a way. And we're just not set up to drop an engine out of the bottom of this car over here. So I had to call in a favor over at Sand Lake Auto, and they said that they would take it in. I guess you can drop what they call the PTU, and it's that little transaxle that's right behind the engine there. They drop that out and they'll be able to drill and tap it, and then they're gonna continue to put it back together. So I got the turbo installed, and all they have to do is put the manifold back on and all of the little heat shields and drill and tap that one oil return, and it should be complete. I absolutely hate that I'm ending this video like this, but it's just, I couldn't go any further, and the best option for him is for him to have a shop who's set up to do something like that, and it's not here. So sorry I'm ending this video like this, but I guess learn from my failure. If it doesn't feel right, then stop ratcheting down on that bolt that's about to break. Lessons learned. This one didn't go the way I wanted it to. Learn from my failure. Anyways, thanks for watching my video.